Shalom again, everybody. Ariel Bartzadok here from the Kosher Torah School, found online at www.koshertorah.com. Saludos and bendiciones desde Costa Rica. We are continuing now our lesson shorts in the introduction into the Sha'arei Kedusha of R Hayim Vital. And this little class I'm going to do right now is, I think, going to be the final one for this introduction before we get into part one of the text in our next class, wherever I will end up. Hear that wind? Hopefully the sound of the wind is not going to bother the audio of our class. But bear with me. I'm in the jungle. That's just the way things are. But okay. Reb Chaim makes mention of the famous story found in the Talmud, in Tractate Hagigah, of the four great sages who attempted to ascend into the Pardes. And many people draw, unfortunately, the wrong conclusions from this story to consider the ascent into Pardes to be something dangerous. Well, that is wrong, but at the same time, that is right. There is both, and we're going to discuss that in this little class. And I've written about these things before, but I think it's important because if we're going to really now be promoting people making the appropriate expansion of psychic consciousness so as to get involved, that's exactly what the four in the Pardes attempted to do themselves. So let's review the story real quick. Four great sages: Ben Azzai, Ben Zoma, Elisha ben Abuya, who became Acher, we'll describe that in a minute, and then, of course, Rabbi Akiva. Now, the story says, Rabbi Akiva gives a warning. He says, when you see the great marble slabs, right, do not say, water, water, all right, because God doesn't allow any kind of lies in his presence. And you read these words and you scratch your head and you go, what on earth? Yeah, I'm paraphrasing it. So if my paraphrase isn't exact and literal, salahli. It's not like I'm reading from a book in the jungle here, even though with internet, you never know. But anyway, getting back to the point. We say that Ben Azzai gazed and died. Pretty intense. Ben Zoma gazed and went insane. Equally intense. Elisha ben Abuya, he gazed and became an apostate. They had to call him someone else, or Acher. And only Rabbi Akiva entered and exited in peace. So, what's the story? What really happened? Well, this is elaborated as a warning. But first, let's discuss what this ascent was really all about. From the Kitvei Ha'ari and other sources, we recognize, if you remember with Rabbi Akiva, even though he entered and exited in peace, he soon after was brutally murdered at the hands of the Roman Empire. According to our understanding, the four sages attempted to go into the psychic world and to serve as psychic assassins and to try to break the power of the angel of Rome and to neutralize his force in the spiritual plane. Now, you might roll your eyes, oh God, who does weirdo stuff? We don't do stuff like that. But I will tell you that I know from my teacher, Rebbe Meir Levi Alav Shalom from Yerushalayim, that in the days of World War II, indeed Rabbi Yehuda Fatia, the great Minhat Yehuda, gathered the Hasidei Bet El with the specific intent to psychically assassinate the Mufti of Jerusalem, who, if you study your history, was the one who actually inspired and directed Adolf Hitler to the final Holocaust and the murder of all the Jews. And it is said that they got together a minyan, a group in Bet El, and they were doing the tikkun, and sensing their involvement in their presence, the angel of the Mufti came and attacked them. And they failed too because of human fear. That's a story my Rebbe Meir told me, and I believe my teacher. But getting back to now the four in the Pardes. They each attempted to do something according to the Ari And the great mistake, according to the Ari, was they had to act together. Now, in those days, historically, they were physically together. But we don't necessarily have to be physically together to act in the psychic plane. But we do need to act psychically together. You know that quantum entanglement stuff that they talk about in quantum physics? Well, when like minds think alike and like minds get together, not physically, but energetically, which could literally transcend space and time, this is what is an energetic multiplier. So recently, go look on YouTube, as long as the channel's still up, I gave a class based on what we call the Kavanot, how to unite with a tzaddik. In other words, how you can bond your mind and thought and consciousness with that of a greater spiritual master, an avatar, a real one. And you can go look at the video up there. There's all kinds of stuff, and you'll take that information. We can coordinate a community of souls regardless of our limitations or distances in space. That's not important. So as long as we have a global community of like-minded souls practicing the same thing, then we have a united front of energetic alignment which can influence into the psychic domain. So this was the mistake of the forward into the Pardes, is each one had, well, let's just call it by modern terms, baggage that they had to deal with. Ben Azzai. Ben Azzai was a great and holy saint. All he thought all his days was to bond with God. Shaviti Hashem, L'negdi Tamid was his motto. Never married, never had any connections or anything to ground him to the earth. So what do you think happens when he goes up and he sees the higher dimensional planes? He looks around and goes, that's pretty cool. I don't think I'm going back. I'm going to stay. And as his psychic energy, his psychic reality, his sentient essence absorbed into the higher realm, it detached from his physical body, leaving it dead. So this is not considered a good thing. We do not ascend to heaven so that we leave the earth behind. On the contrary, our mission is to bring heaven down to earth. That is our struggle. That is what we must do. So therefore, attachments to this world which are bad, get rid of. You don't need them. But attachments to this world that are good, you hold on to them. And I'm talking about things like love, family, loyalty, duty, responsibility, and all that good righteousness stuff. But all the rest of that stuff, fancy cars and all that other kinds of monetary expressions, I'm telling you right now, they're going. Whether you like it or not, they're going to be gone. And it won't be too long now. So let them go. Focus. Ben Zoma, another righteous, holy man. He looked around the way of this world and saw how nuts and insane it was. And he went up to heaven and he saw how everything was order and balanced and in harmony. And he looked here and he looked there and he said, I don't get it. I don't get it. How can one come from the other? How can the two work together? How can there be a unity here? His mind couldn't process the opposites. And because of that, it says he went nuts. Remember, the heavenly reality, what we call heavenly reality, the higher psychic realms, it's almost a mirror reflection opposite to our world here. And it takes a lot of internal ability of balance to be able to deal with the opposites. Remember what Isaiah wrote, chapter 45, verse 7. God and God alone is the author of good and evil, light and darkness. We may be living at a time where we think the forces of evil are dominating and taking over. We saw this 100 years ago in Germany. Okay? That was pretty nasty, pretty intense. But God was in charge then, just like God is in charge now. But you must learn lessons. Like Eliyahu Hanavi, who calls down fire from heaven from God and killed all the evil prophets of Baal. And their patron, Queen Jezebel, says, By this time tomorrow, buddy, my assassins will cut you down. So what does Elijah do? He says, ho, 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 in the name of Hashem, I will psychically smite them down, call fire from heaven down on them. Nope. Elijah got the message, and he says, you know what? I think it's time to go on vacation. I'm leaving the country. And he left northern Israel, and he left southern Judah, and he went all the way out to Sinai. All right, he went to the cave, and he said, then he bought a shovel out. He wants to kill me. I'm ready to check out. Could you send for my car, please? And of course, the famous Merkavah, the chariot of fire, comes, and Elijah bugs out. But okay, I don't really anticipate many of us going to have chariots of fire coming down from heaven to bug us out. So we got to be real, got to be practical, got to be able to deal with things in a realistic, practical way. Ben Zoma couldn't handle that, and therefore he went insane. Now the next one is Sha'arei, Ben Azzai, righteous, holy man. He looked up and he saw everything in heaven. He got it. He understood it. He looked down at earth and he saw everything is corrupt, and he recognized the unity, and he laughed. And he goes, oh my gosh, what a stupid world this physical place is. We don't need all of these things that we do. They're all for the sake of tikkun. I've made it. I have ascended. I am mitukan. I am rectified. And Sha'arei rose to the level of what we can call Torah HaMashiach. But got to remember something. Wise words in the Bible. Never be a stumbling block before the blind. Yes, Sha'arei was at such a high level, such a powerful level, that if he even chose to eat pork, he could say a blessing on it and revert it from uncleanliness to cleanliness. That was his level of Kedusha. But we can't live like that. That violates the halakha. Don't go around thinking, oh, I'm so holy I can violate the law. No, you can't. No, you won't. This was Elisha ben Abuya's great mistake. He thought, if I am in such a high level, I no longer need the mitzvot because I've already reached the rectification. Well, you can't live like that in a community because you become a stumbling block to the blind. People say, well, if he can do it, I can do it. If the great rabbi can eat pork and do all these bad things and violate the Sabbath, and it doesn't affect his soul because he's at such a state of yichud, well, so am I. No, you're not. And that is why people fall. And that is why Acher was subject to the ostracization of our sages. But yet, the Gemara says that his student, Rebbe Meir, still never left his side. Why? Because Rebbe Meir understood his Rebbe. He understood everything that Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya was doing and saying, but they knew that he was doing the wrong thing in the wrong way. Even though what he said was right. I mean, this is why it says he was kotzetz b'nitiyot. He was uprooting the small plants, which is a word from he became an apostate. Because you can't throw away Torah mitzvot. You can't throw away the moral code, the things that all of us need to live by, until such a time that globally and collectively we ascend to the Messianic age. Then, collectively, we take the next step into higher consciousness, into a lifestyle of Mashiach. Not until then. And the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan and others said, I'm not going to stop until Rabbi Elisha has been re-accepted into heaven, which he was. But his wise words were never disbanded by our sages, never kicked out. They just referred to them by a different name. And they referred to him as Acher, someone else or others. So many a time we read in the Gemara and the Mishnah about Acherim Omrim, others say, many times that is Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya. We don't want him reference his name because of what he did. We can't have that example. Rabbi Akiva, he went up, he came down. He recognized what it is to ascend. He recognized what it was to come down. He recognized the unity of all and the necessity of the continuity of things until we ascend in complete messianic consciousness. Well, their example was written down for us so that we can know and understand and follow to this day. But know this, whenever you're going to get involved with politics. It's an old saying, originally from a Jewish source, a lesson well learned by our sages with the disaster that happened with Bar Kokhba. One who lives by the sword dies by the sword. No, in times like in Nazi persecution, of course you have to fight back and do whatever you need to do. Everybody knows that. That's common sense. But recognize that the true power and strength is in the spiritual. Not in just empty prayers and hoping down, but true, powerful, intense psychic ability to try to properly do what we can call psychic interventions. This is what our great sages throughout the generations have done to the day of Rabbi Yehuda Fatia himself. And if you know the story well, while Rabbi Yehuda Fatia did fail to stop the angel of the Mufti of Jerusalem, he was involved in a very active Kabbalistic ritual, which literally stopped General Rommel's army at El Alamein. He created a psychic shield which the Nazis' armies could not penetrate. And therefore, even the British understood the power of the great Mikubal. And you'd be surprised how many people in intelligence communities around the world recognize the power of the authentic and true Mikubalim, who know what and how to do things. But okay, guys, it's our time now. It's our turn to rise up, to be like Rabbi Akiva, to be like a Rabbi Yehuda Fatia, to learn the proper ways and means of ascent, like the Baal Shem Tov was told by Mashiach, because this is the sign that we need for the coming of Mashiach. If we're living in desperate times, then desperate times will require of us desperate action. Like the Pasuk says, Et lasot Lashem, hefiru Toratecha. It's time to act for God because they have made void His Torah. So learn the paths of ascent. See the classes, the courses that I have from the Sha'arei Kedusha sections 3 and 4 already online. Buy them with a click of a button. All right? Take advantage while this is still out there, because as things creep forward, don't be surprised or that if you see many of the religious communities being shut down like many in the political communities. Remember, there are powers out there that have serious agendas with certain dark forces, which are very anti-religious and very anti-Semitic. Take advantage of what's available now, because a year ago, I wouldn't have said, well, you never know what the future will be. But now I will. You never know what the future is going to be. You don't know what's going to be available. So take advantage now. Learn these things now. Do what we can, because together, united, we stand. And remember the opposite. Divided, we fall. So let's learn to stand together in the Kedusha, the holiness of kosher Torah. Learn these things, practice these things, do these things. I'm here to support you, and I thank you guys out there for being here to support me and our school. You go to our PayPal page, make donations and all the rest of that stuff. That's how we survive. Alrighty, guys, get to work. We'll continue in the Sha'arei Kedusha stuff, but you got to get to work. All right? And remember, Lefum Tzara Agra. According to what you put in, that's what you're going to get out. And the wise words of Rabbi Tarfon. Lo alecha hamelacha legmor, aval ata lo ben harin levatel lamena. It's not up to you to complete the job. You're not going to do everything all by yourself. But you're not free to avoid your share. Get to work. Ariel Bar Tzadok here from the Kosher Torah School, presently visiting Costa Rica. I'll see you all in our next class. God bless. Shalom.